Hello and welcome, I'm your CodeMonkey. So GDC has just wrapped up, and Unity as usual published their Unity 2025 roadmap. Here is where they talk about all things coming to the engine in the near future, like this year as well as beyond. I watched it live as they announced it, and there are some really interesting changes. They started off showcasing this slide, so basically talking about what are the main benefits, what are the core pillars that they see of Unity. So the main one is to reach as many players as possible, then to achieve the best performance on any device, then have powerful workflows to enable you to make some engaging games, and have end-to-end support for live games. And the way they plan to validate that all of these things are being done correctly is through quality through product verification. It's actually interesting because it's actually something they've been doing for quite a long time, but they've only just casually mentioned it, whereas now it seems like they added some, let's say, specific branding onto it. So production verification, that is now the official name for this. Basically, this is how Unity works with various game studios. They work directly with them so they can get feedback to then improve the engine to improve it for literally everyone else. So for the developers they work with, there's the developer behind Pokemon Sleep. There's Second Dinner. This is the studio behind Marvel Snap. Then there's Kinetic Games. These are the developers behind the hit game Phasmophobia. Black Sound Games over here. That's the developer behind the very successful great game Dredge. And a bunch more. So yep, again, this is technically not a new thing. They've been working with external developers for a long time and basically using that feedback to improve the engine. But it's nice to see them talk more publicly about this and give it an actual proper name. There are quite a lot of people that only say that Unity should basically dogfood their own engine, so they should make games in order to learn how to better improve the engine. That was the whole thing they were building with the Gigaia project. Sadly, that project ended up being cancelled, but thankfully they are still working with other developers, so they still get roughly the same kind of feedback. Then just a quick word on how exactly is Unity 6 being released. So the Unity 6 LTS, that one is out already. That's actually something that just the other day I saw a comment asking me when Unity 6 LTS was coming out, and yep, it's been out for about 6 months now. So if you only use LTS versions, like usually you should, then yep, you can definitely use the Unity 6 version right now. Unity 6.1 is currently in beta, and it's going to be fully released in April, and then afterwards they were going to have 6.2, 6.3, and so on. During the Q&A with the Unity CEO, he actually mentioned 3 separate Unity releases this year. I don't know if he misspoke or not, but apparently that means we might have 3 releases just this year. So perhaps 6.1 coming out in April, perhaps 6.2 somewhere in the summer, and perhaps 6.3 somewhere in like November. But that's just speculation. As of right now, 6.1, yep, that is coming out in April, and then something else in the future, and then potentially in the far future, likely next year I'm assuming, is going to be Unity Next Gen, that's what they're calling it, which is likely going to be named Unity 7. On this entire roadmap, there are basically these badges that showcase when each feature is coming out, so already available on these various LTSs, coming in 6.1, coming in a future 6 release, or actually literally in the future. So this one likely means something like Unity 7, so likely next year. And on their first goal to reach as many players globally as they can, for that they're really investing in web. So first of all, there's mobile web support, meaning being able to run Unity games anywhere on the web, including run games in mobile browsers. This is something that apparently was a huge challenge. I'm not very familiar with web and not very familiar with mobile, but as soon as this was announced a few years ago, there were lots of collabs, so apparently this is a really big deal. Basically being able to just have your phone, open up a browser, and from there play any kind of Unity game. So definitely really lowering the barrier for accessibility for people to be able to play your games. Then another thing is web GPU. So this basically allows the web itself, so literally just a browser, to be able to access the GPU to do things like compute shaders, which in turn lets you do a lot of really awesome stuff. Like for example over here, rendering multiple skin meshes. If you have direct access to the GPU, you can definitely do quite a lot more things. And then instant games. So these are basically very, very tiny games, like some kilobytes to just a handful of megabytes. The entire goal is meant to be instant, so pretty much load and start the game instantly, without much download, without much loading. Then on Android, a bunch more improvements, so there's more support for large screens and foldable. Apparently you can use the latest Android APIs to query for some kind of information from those foldables, like the hinge information. Then if you add 16 kilobyte page sizes, so as far as I know, apparently this helps boost memory performance. And perhaps more importantly, you've got Vulkan, so Vulkan and graphics jobs on Android devices. At least on desktop, enabling graphics jobs usually leads to a really nice performance boost. So being able to have this work by default on mobile, that seems a great option. Then on Android XR, this is something that Google announced just recently. It is basically an OS that is meant to be more native to like XR devices. So it's kind of another platform running on top of like AR glasses and things like that. This is coming out in 6.1, and then also in 6.1, some more templates to be able to set up your projects for Android XR, and also optimize for performance, so using foveated rendering. In case you don't know what that is, that's a really awesome feature that I really hope more and more devices incorporate. Basically, it allows you to see where exactly your eyes are looking at, so you can render just a tiny circle, render that in full resolution, then less resolution as you go out and out. That's a really awesome feature that has the potential to boost performance by a massive amount. On MetaQuest, also a bunch of improvements. The one that I find most impressive is this one over here, basically handling occlusion over here behind some kind of glass object. That is really impressive. I still remember in the early days of mixed reality where doing things like this were literally impossible. The depth sensors were only good enough to roughly guess there's something here, and yeah, being able to showcase the digital object behind the physical object, that was really difficult. So this little video over here, this seems super impressive. And then on to PC and console rendering performance. So on this one, just a bunch of improvements, just improved performance across the board, upgrading from DX11 to DX12, I think by default. In general, that should help performance in most use cases, although I think there are still some special use cases where DX11 might be faster, but in general, DX12 is usually faster. And of course, you've got the split graphics jobs. That's something you can already enable in your preferences and already gives you quite a nice boost. Then reduce stuttering at runtime. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure what is a pipeline state object. Again, I am not a graphics programmer. So basically on all of these, I'm just happy to see improvements. For me, I'm mainly a gameplay programmer, so in terms of graphics, I really just toggle checkboxes and I hope that it runs as fast as possible. And thanks to these, yep, that does seem to be the case. Ray tracing performance also improving, so yep, that's nice to see. All of these coming out in 6.1. Then for Xbox consoles, being able to choose the GDK version. This is all something that I don't know much about, but during the livestream there was someone that mentioned that this was a pretty massive change. I think the GDK version used to be linked to some kind of Unity version, so if you wanted a different one, you had to use a different Unity version. I think that's how it was, so being able to have this checkbox, that should help save quite a bit of time. Then on topic of achieving the best performance on any device, on here they highlight the GPU resident drawer and the various graphics options that they already released in 6.0. I made a video where I went through all of these Unity 6 features and how to actually enable them. If you enable all of them, then in most cases you are going to get a very nice boost to rendering performance. And again, for me as someone who is not a graphics programmer, these are really great. Just toggle some checkboxes and your game just runs faster. That's awesome. One thing being added in 6.1 is the First Plus rendering mode. And this one, again, on some scenarios, it has a very nice boost. Then also adding variable rate shading, which also helps improve performance in many scenarios. These are coming in 6.1, so just next month. Then faster iteration and content optimization. So reduced build time with URP, that is really great. Specifically, this, I believe, limits how many shader variants you have, especially when you have fog enabled. And then over here, the new Mesh LED system. Now this one is coming on 6.x, so perhaps 6.2, perhaps 6.3. So not coming out in April, but sometime in the future. This is the new Mesh LED system, basically automatically generating LEDs. So it's kind of similar to something like Unreal's Nanite. Basically, you take an object that has a ton of LEDs and just automatically generates all the other ones. Importantly is how it even works with skin meshes. So you can take those and automatically generate all these. So this one has tons of polygons and this one has very little. But still, everything looks very nice. So going from 81 million to 4.5. And again, this whole thing being automatic, that is a really nice boost. Then Synthes, this is their AI inference machine learning model. This one is apparently also getting some performance improvements in 6.1, specifically on the X12 platforms. So that's the Windows editor and player as well as the Xbox consoles. Synthes is something that is very interesting. Basically, you can train some very complex model beforehand, and then basically just run it on the device much faster. So it's a way of doing some kind of complex machine learning things without having to contact the internet. Again, it's all local. The best use case for Synthes that I've seen was when they made their Time Goes cinematic, and how over there they basically trained an AI with all kinds of very complex deformations. So basically they calculated those very time-consuming deformations beforehand. Then they fed all of those transformations directly into the model so that the model was able to kind of generate some deformations at runtime much faster. So the cloth that gets deformed as those characters are running around, usually that would be very expensive to do at runtime. So all deformation you see on all the cloth, doing that at runtime is usually very expensive. But using Synthes, again, just a pre-trained model beforehand, then just runs in inference, so it can run in real time, and the whole thing runs very performant and looks really great. So yep, this is definitely one of the best use cases that I've seen for some kind of machine learning brain, and using it for a proper use case in real time. Then something really awesome is how in 6.1 they are publishing the Project Auditor. This is a really fascinating tool that I only found out a while ago, and I only found out about it thanks to this awesome video from Git Amend. I had no idea that this tool existed. It seems really awesome, but I have no idea where they talked about this, so I have no idea where he found this tool, but it is absolutely excellent. Basically, it's a tool that you run it and it automatically scans your entire project and tries to see all kinds of things that you could potentially improve. Now, some of these things are things that you possibly want intentionally like this, but other things are possibly mistakes or just issues that you might not even know. So by seeing them all over here in this nice window, that allows you to basically do a nice health check on your entire project, and basically see all the tiny things that you could possibly improve. And yep, in 6.1, this one is going from an experimental package into an actual supported package. And same thing on the profiler, that one is also being updated with a bunch more information. So yep, you can get as much fine-tuned performance as you can. Then for ECS, finally we get some nice dots, some nice ECS. they are polishing ECS with NTs 1.4. So again, in case you don't know, Unity ECS or Unity DOTS has been fully released and production ready since Unity 6 was out. Or actually it was before that. I think it's been over a year since DOTS 1.0 came out. So it's definitely already production ready, already very stable. I even have my entire DOTS course where I made a game internally using DOTS. The API is definitely very stable, very easy to use right now. It is much better than it was like 5 years ago. And the benefits that it provides are indeed truly insane. You can write some code and literally make that code run 260 times faster. That is a literal actual example. So yep, if you use the power of DOTS, if you need performance, then DOTS is an absolutely amazing tool. So it's great to see that in Unity 22 LTS, which already supports DOTS 1.0, and in the future they are continuously polishing it, so continuously adding tiny benefits onto it. So DOTS is definitely something that is here to stay. It's not something that just came out and is going away. It is something they are betting on for the future, constant improvements, constant iteration. And of course, improving the jobs in the profiler. So once again, just more improvements onto it across the board. And then here's the one for the big future. So it's modernizing the foundation of the engine. Again, these are all marked as future. So there's no mention on timeline, but if I had to guess, I would say Unity 7, so likely next year. And first of all is ECS for all. This is where they talked about basically merging game objects and entities so that you don't have to specifically specify, okay, I want to make a dots game or a game object game, even though right now you can already mix them, but making that mix be quite a bit more native, putting them together in a much more natural way. That's their goal. That's what they're going for. Then of course, .NET, so upgrading the engine to use the core CLR. This is something that should provide quite a lot of benefits, especially in terms of iteration speed. This is something they have been talking about for many years now, so it's going to be awesome when they finally get it, but this seems to be well on the way, well on track for hopefully Unity 7, so hopefully next year. Again, no mention, that's just my guess. And of course, by using core CLR, they will also be able to automatically update the latest .NET version. And then for the content pipeline, this is all something that I also mentioned on the roadmap 6 months ago, where they are basically rewriting the whole thing from scratch to make the content importing to make that much more efficient. Right now, if you try to import a ton of assets at once, especially very large assets, it actually takes quite a lot of time. Whereas over here, they are making something that becomes quite a bit more iterative. So it kind of loads like a low quality mesh, and then asynchronously, it is going to load a more high quality mesh, and so on and so on. So instead of just staring at a black screen, waiting for everything to load at once, instead of that, you should be able to see everything load bit by bit. So it should lead to Unity by itself feeling quite a bit more responsive. Then the section on powerful workflows for engaging games. So first is powerful lighting with adaptive probe volumes. This is a really awesome Unity tool. If you want high quality lighting, definitely look into this one. Basically, it's a way to automatically spawn light probes directly on your entire game, but you don't have to manually place them like you had to previously. They can be placed automatically, then you can bake them with all kinds of really high quality lighting, and you can even interpolate between various different lighting scenarios. This is already out in 6.0, and here are the AI capabilities that I was mentioning a while ago. So the whole machine learning Synthes model, yep, this whole thing, the cloth deformation, that is all handled using Synthes. So yep, just an interesting thing, and they are continuously improving on that, continuously improving on Synthes. Then the other type of AI that they have is, for example, their Muse chat, which is over here. Basically, it's an LLM, so you can talk to it. But importantly, they've actually made quite a lot of upgrades to this in the past few months. So previously, it used to be just a web, so you had to go onto a browser in order to talk to Muse chat, which was nice because it was trained specifically on Unity knowledge, but still it was external, you had to go to a website. Whereas something they've updated quite a few months ago is this. It's basically making that Muse chat window be directly inside the editor. So it's much easier to use, literally just open an editor window. And importantly, now it actually has quite a bit of context. So you can pass in some reference to some kind of prefab, then say, write me a script to place this prefab randomly around the scene, and it actually does it. So Muse is getting quite a lot of improvements, being quite a bit better over time. Then you've got the sprite editor. So this one also seems pretty great for automatically upscaling sprites. So I think this is a great tool, specifically if you have some kind of very old game that you want to remaster, and you only have some tiny sprites. If you want to remaster it right now, then the sprite editor by default has some nice upscaling tools. So here are those improvements for Muse Chat. So you can automate some repetitive tasks. You use natural language in order to tell it to generate some kind of editor script. Then you can even store those scripts, favorite them, and then reuse them later on. You have object and console attachment. So you can drag an actual prefab and use it in the prompt. Or you can drag some kind of error that you see in the console and ask it to help you explain why that error is happening. So this could be useful, especially for beginners, for learning why these scripts have found some errors. And then apparently they're working on improving the C# code generation. Specifically, they're doing one thing, which is they pre-compile the code before they actually give it, so that when you receive the code from MuseChat, you know for a fact that it can actually compile. Although, again, when it comes to code generation, for me, my answer is always, personally, I'm not a fan of using AI to do that, just because it very quickly devolves into some very low quality code. If you have some very tiny snippets, yep, for that it can work. But if you try to use this on more and more complex projects, then the whole thing will eventually just fall apart. So personally, I wouldn't use it for something too complex, but for simple tiny things, yep, at least you know for certain that the code will compile. Then more tools that they are currently researching for in the future. So integrated the asset generators, so you can generate textures, sprites, and animations. I think the animations one is actually a really great tool. Basically, you can just input some text, like do a backflip, and then convert it into an actual humanoid animation that you can use in your projects. Then generation audio, so generate some sound effects. And coming in the future, so likely very far away, is 3D generation. So text to 3D meshes, to skyboxes, texture generation, and so on. So yep, they're definitely working on improving their AI tools by quite a bit. Although of course, AI is a very hot topic right now. It is very controversial among some people. The CEO actually talked about AI quite a bit during the Q&A livestream. For me, I basically just see AI as yet another tool, and like with any tool, it can be used or abused. So in this case, for these tools, for these AI-generated tools, the things that these output are definitely improving, but I would say they're not yet at the perfect professional level. So I do think that these AI tools would be really great in the prototyping stage. So instead of having a game that just has boring gray box cubes, instead of that, you can actually generate some nice sprites, some nice 3D models, some nice sound effects, and basically make your prototypes be a bit more interesting. Although I would still very much recommend that at the end of the project, you hire some proper artists or buy some proper assets in order to replace the ones that you made with AI. So I think this is potentially very useful, especially for beginners, and especially for people just starting out learning how to make games. So potentially people like I was 20 years ago, when I was a kid that wanted to learn how to make games. However, back then I had no money whatsoever. And sadly, these tools that, like I said, would be really awesome for prototypes and for beginners, sadly, they are really all behind a paywall. You can try for free, but it's only a 30-day free trial. After that, Unity Muse comes out to $30 per month. So yeah, sadly, there's no like X amount of credits you get every single month. Nope, you only got 30 days, then that's it, and you gotta pay $30 per month, which is actually quite a bit. So on these tools, I think they do have their use case, and I think it's awesome how they continue trying to improve upon them, but at the same time, with such a relatively high paywall, I think they won't be actually accessible to the people that I think would benefit the most from it. So my hope is that sometime in the future they figure out some way to offer at least some amount of credits for free per month. The UI Toolkit is still getting constant improvements, so adding support for World Space UI, for custom shaders, and supporting vector graphics. So these are all nice, great improvements. Although personally, when it comes to UI, I'm still very much a big fan of just normal Unity UI when it comes to real-time stuff. When it comes to editor tools, then yep, the UI Toolkit is absolutely excellent. For example, the companion project that I made for my C# course, the way that I set up all those windows, the way that I made all those interactive exercises, that was all made using UI Toolkit, and it was infinitely easier than working with the old IMGUI system. And just recently for making my CodeMonkey Toolkit, again, for all these custom windows, I made them using UI Toolkit. And yep, it is really awesome to work with. I really like it for making this, for making editor tools. But when it comes to in-game UI, for that, I still very much prefer Unity UI. So there was something they mentioned on the last roadmap 6 months ago at Unite, which is they mentioned how in the future, they see how UI Toolkit is going to be the only option, and they're eventually planning to deprecate Unity UI. And I really, really hope they don't do that. Like I said, I really love Unity UI. I think it's really awesome. It's a mature tool. It works. It does everything I want. So I really don't want to be forced to use a different tool for Unity UI. Although I do see just how awesome this one is for making editor stuff. So personally, in the future, I want to keep using UI Toolkit for making editor tools, and I want to keep using Unity UI for making my in-game UI. Then they also improved accessibility with the native screen reader. I had no idea this was a thing, but apparently Windows and macOS have a native screen reader, something that actually reads whatever's on the screen. And apparently Unity is adding default support for this, so that people even who are visually impaired can still play your games, so that's nice, that's awesome. Then the animation system, so the brand new animation system they've been talking about for quite a while now. This is one that is meant to be based on DOTS, based on ECS, so it is meant to be insanely capable, insanely performant. And for this one, yep, adding skeletal asset management, animation blending, remapping for different skeleton sizes, then adding a state machine, adding a way to manage all of the animation properties and events, and of course, excellent runtime performance, because again, the whole thing, this new system is actually based on DOTS, so it benefits from jobs and bursts without you having to intentionally work with entities. So this is definitely one of the big things that I'm looking forward to. This is one of the things that is going to bring basically the benefits of DOTS to everyone, even people who don't want to intentionally work with DOTS. If you use this new animation system, even if you make your game entirely using game objects, even if so, if you're using this system, then you're already going to benefit from the massive improvements of DOTS. So that is why I'm definitely a big fan of DOTS, because they're basically building this nice foundation, and then on that foundation they can build all of these extremely specialized tools. Those are going to be extremely performant, extremely efficient, and you yourself, even without directly using DOTS, you are still going to benefit from that really awesome foundation. So I'm definitely looking forward to this tool. And I thought this tool was actually coming out only in Unity 7, so unlikely next year, but over here it's actually saying 6.x. So perhaps this one might actually be coming out this year. Again, no mention on what the X is. Maybe it's going to be on 6.2, maybe this summer, maybe 6.3, maybe November, or maybe it's actually some 6. Something coming out early next year. So no mention on timeline, but the fact that it says 6.x means that it's actually likely going to be earlier than Unity 7. So yep, definitely looking forward to this one. Then on physics, they're adding the ability to swap the backends. This is something that you can already do in DOTS, and apparently you'll be able to change it even in normal Unity physics. So you can swap it from using Unity physics to using Havoc, using NVIDIA PhysX. Then it's already getting some physics improvements, and they're also making a nice Entities vehicle controller. They've already published a very interesting character controller package quite a while ago. This one is also based on DOTS. It is very capable. It is capable of handling pretty much every kind of scenario. So it's nice to see them basically doing that same thing, but now for vehicles, so that should be interesting. Again, all of these coming out on 6.x, so no specific timeline. Then some more improvements to build automation, so cloud build, as well as live collaboration and project sharing. Now for me, I mostly work solo, so I don't really benefit from these tools, but from what I can tell, they do seem to be nice and interesting. So if you work as part of the team, these seem nice. So this one's coming out in 6.1, the build automation, and then this one, project sharing in 6.x, and then end-to-end support for live games. This is something that for some studios is absolutely crucial. Now for me personally, I only make normal, standard, premium PC games, so for me I don't normally have any kind of live component to my games, but there are definitely quite a lot of studios, especially on mobile, to which this is absolutely a must-have. On this, they talked about the Project Center. So this is basically taking what they kind of already did with the Multiplayer Center, where you basically got a window and you can choose all kinds of options for what kind of multiplayer game you want to make, and automatically installs all those packages. And now in the Project Center, they're basically applying that same idea to basically everything, even outside of multiplayer. So you can choose what kind of game you want to make, what kind of platforms you want to target, and they're basically going to recommend a bunch of packages for you to get started with. Then they're also making some kind of little widgets, things like character controller, text chat, and so on, and you can basically just add those widgets and very quickly get a prototype up and running. So if the Project Center seems quite interesting. Then they're also trying to make it so that Unity is a first-class multiplayer game engine. So they're consolidating all those tools into one. They've already did that. They used to have a separate package for things like lobby, relay, and so on. Whereas quite a while ago, they basically put them all together in just one package, so the whole thing is much easier to use. They also added distributed authority and host migration. So that's a different way of making games. Instead of having just one host or just one server, you have distributed authority, which is how multiple clients can have authority over different objects. And by doing it that way, apparently something that gets by default is host migration. That is one of the most requested features on normal client-hosted games. And if you use netcode for game objects with the normal client to server or client to host, if you do that, then you basically have to implement host migration yourself. Whereas apparently, based on what they said, using distributed authority, you get it by default. That is something I have not yet looked into it, so I definitely want to look at that. And they also mentioned cross-platform burst determinism. So basically making it so that your games being compiled with burst are going to be deterministic regardless of what platform you play on. When making some very complex games, things that require, for example, rollback netcode, for those kinds of things, it is absolutely crucial that the code runs exactly the same on every single platform. So yep, achieving this is definitely going to be an interesting thing. They've been trying to solve this challenge for quite a while now. And something happening in the future is convergence of netcodes. So they've talked about this previously, how basically their goal is, right now they have netcode for game objects and netcode for entities. In the future, their goal is basically to merge them together. Kind of like how they mentioned how in Unity 7 or Unity Next Gen, eventually the goal will be to unify the render pipelines. So in here, very much the same thing, unify both netcode for game objects and netcode for entities. I'm definitely very curious to see how exactly they're going to do that. Just a while ago, I made 2 free courses, one on making a game using netcode for game objects and the other one on making that same game using netcode for entities. It was interesting to make the exact same game using those 2 different tool stacks. So I'm curious to see how they're going to merge them together. They're actually quite different. I'm guessing this will also be dependent on their whole thing about making game objects and entities much more tightly integrated. Then more multiplayer tools, so multiplayer game server hosting. This is how you can basically host servers in the cloud and you can automatically spin up or down some servers. Vivox, voice and text chat, so that's another great tool. Then they've got a bunch more game backend tools, a bunch more tools to handle live content, a bunch more tools for analytics. So basically if you're trying to make live games, things that live over time, things that have tons of constant updates, if so, then all of these tools should be quite useful. So yep, this is their roadmap for 2025 and beyond. So basically focusing on these 4 core pillars. So reach as many players as possible with the best performance on every device, with nice workflows to allow you to build engaging games, with end-to-end support for live games, and the whole thing, again, quality through production verification. So basically every one of these tools that they build, they're going to work with all those developers that we saw in the beginning. Those developers use those tools, they give feedback to Unity, then Unity hopefully uses that feedback to improve the engine, improve these tools so that everyone can benefit from all these improvements so we can all have a really awesome engine. So yep, basically this roadmap, very interesting, nothing too flashy, no big announcements. Basically just constant iterative progress, just constantly improving the engine tiny bit by bit, which is what people have been asking for many years. For the longest time, people have been saying, okay, stop announcing brand new things that are many years in advance, instead just focus on fixing and improving the things one by one, and it seems to be that's exactly what they're doing. All of these tiny things, improving the rendering, improving the performance of the engine, improving the usability of various tools. So in this whole roadmap, nothing too bombastic, just nice tiny improvements. And by the way, if you want to make some awesome games, there's an excellent Humble Bundle happening right now. You can get thousands of really awesome Cindy assets and get them for just $30. Using these, you can make all kinds of games. For example, the animation pack over here, this is a really awesome animation pack that is really great for pretty much any kind of project. You've got all of the base locomotion animations. The construction pack would be great for any kind of, let's say, management, construction, house building kind of game. For the dog pack, this one is obviously perfect for any kind of game where you have a really nice companion. The Dungeon Realms pack would be perfect for any kind of, let's say, dwarf mining game, so something like Deep Rock Galactic. Or make some awesome sci-fi interfaces with this interface pack. So yep, lots of awesome stuff, very cheap. And actually, even if you pick up just the $1 bundle, this one includes the particle effects pack. This one's really awesome, contains all kinds of interesting VFX. So if you don't have any kind of VFX pack, then just this one is definitely worth it. But the whole thing for 20-30 bucks, this one definitely great, you can make all kinds of games with. Check it out with the link in the description. Alright, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.